Welcome to an exciting edition of Founding Philly, where we assemble local startup founders at the Fiddler Club to discuss their entrepreneurship journeys. Gain deep insights and inspiration from this roundtable discussion with Stimulus founder Tiffanie Stanard and Lula Commerce co-founders Tom Falzani and Adit Gupta. Well, welcome everyone to the Founding Philly Roundtable Series. Thank you all for being here. What we're doing this Roundtable Series is a bit different than our previous episodes, where we're bringing in local founders, builders, ecosystem partners from the area, from the past. I know both of you have been on the podcast. Together, the Roundtable to have an open, candid conversation about the startup journey. This episode is brought to you by Comcast NBC Universal Lift Labs, located right here in the great city of Philadelphia. Lift Labs builds partnerships with strategically relevant startups that inform their strategy and transform the products and experiences that Comcast, NBC Universal, and Sky deliver to their customers around the world. Visit lift.comcast.com to learn more. Before we jump in, I want to just do quick intros. So Tiffanie, you mind kicking us off before we jump in?
Sure. My name is Tiffanie Stanard. I am the CEO and founder of Stimulus. We're based here in Philadelphia. We are in the procurement supply chain industry.
Amazing. Tom?
Tom Falzani, co-founder and chief product officer at Lula Commerce, and we provide e-commerce enablement technology to convenience stores.
Adit Gupta, co-founder and CEO at Lula Commerce with Tom.
Today, what I want to focus on is navigating product adoption and growth of early stage companies. I was looking at the dates when I last had you both on the podcast, and it was over a year and a half ago. So a lot has changed since then. The first thing I want to talk about is just specifically around product adoption and seeing product acceptance. What are some clear signals of product acceptance, and maybe how has that changed over time?
Yeah, I think for us, so our goal with Stimulus is to really create a better buyer and vendor experience, and creating a product for not only product leaders throughout an organization and enterprise, but also allowing for other stakeholders to be able to utilize the product to understand what type of suppliers are that company working with, what type of suppliers they could be working with, what is the relationship that they have with their suppliers within their supply chain. So for adoption for us is that land and expand across the organization. So we may start with the procurement team or the sourcing team, but if the CFO is now looking at data that we've been able to collect, or the marketing team or the IT team is now looking at data that we've been able to collect, because now it's a place that is collecting siloed data that's normally all over the place, now it's in one place. And we're helping them make sense of how they're spending, how they could be spending based upon their budget. Then we are seeing that stickiness and that adoption across the organization. So we're always looking at, okay, we may start with one team, but the goal is to create something that allows for other teams throughout the organization to be like, oh, I can't wait to use this product, or at least I don't mind using this product, because in procurement, you don't want to use most of the products in this space. Even procurement leaders don't want to use a lot of products in this space. So you want to create something that is user-friendly and easy to just jump on to learn really quick information.
Yeah. Anything to add at it?
What are the earliest indicators of customer behavior that allow you to understand that they like your product enough to continue using it? Just because you make the sale doesn't mean that you have product market fit. And I think where most companies go wrong is they sell an annual contract to be heartbroken a year later when they have tremendous churn. And so we made all of our contracts monthly so that we have to work towards earning everyone's business every month. And even the biggest companies. Additionally, I think from a customer behavior perspective, like from a quantitative standpoint, it's like NRR, are you growing someone's business over time? From a qualitative standpoint, a lot of startups feel bad when they get negative feedback from their customers. We actually think it's a blessing. I think that when you have folks so engaged with their product that every bug allows them to feel that frustration, that means you're building something that's mission critical. Because if it wasn't mission critical, no one would care if you had a bug. So I think that's what we look for from a qualitative standpoint. How are customers feeling? What's their feedback? How quickly do they reach out to us when there's a bug? And then from a quantitative standpoint, we have feature flags on all of our screens to understand adoption per feature, per screen. but most basic adoption metric is net revenue retention. Am I retaining this customer over many cohorts? That's like pretty simple. Similar to Tiffanie, land and expand is our core metric that we track.
Yeah.
Really for us, I mean, Adit, both of us being from the convenience store industry, myself working at Wawa, his parents own a convenience store, we really obsessed over having a really deep knowledge of all of the technology companies already in the space, the distributors they were working with. And so we built really, really, really strong relationships with all of them. And that's where the stickiness factor comes in, right? You know, if we're working with products they're already using, tapping into their back office systems, tapping into their inventory, you know, working with their distributors to get the word out of Lula Commerce, that's where we really started to see adoption and you know, word of mouth. The stickiness and signal was when we started to realize a lot of our customers started to realize the value we're bringing, you know, bringing more revenue to them, more orders, more new customers through their doors and online. And they started to talk to, it's a very niche community, it's a great community in industry. Our most prized customers started to talk to other convenience stores and say, hey, you know, if you're looking to do e-commerce delivery in the convenience store space, these are the guys. And that's when we really started to see signals that, you know, there's great adoption and, you know, people are talking for us.
And to that last point that you made, that you're always trying to deliver way more value than they're actually paying for, what goes into that? And like, is it, of course you want to win them over, but what is that kind of positioning as a company that you're trying to do with that kind of approach?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think from a value realization perspective, our service is not just our software, but all of the things we do behind the scenes to work on behalf of our customers. Oftentimes you can't put a price to it because it's just work that we're doing. So we've started to track things like hours saved. Therefore, from hours you can derive time or money saved. And that's one example of how we're trying to realize value. We're also trying to call out like anomalies that we help saved because of our software, whether it's catching disputes or catching orders that they would have otherwise missed if they weren't using our software. All of that adds to the value on top of the basic service, which is all the core features. This is like everything on top of that you're getting. That's how we try to realize value.
Right.
Yeah, similar.
You mentioned customer feedback, that you think it's a blessing. I'm sure some of the engineers that are working on the bugs might not think it's a blessing, but I do understand what you're saying is that customer feedback drives a lot of those improvements that you actually are end up doing. We were talking about that. How do you kind of filter some of that customer feedback or some of those perspectives that you get from customers, and how do you know which ones to actually act on and prioritize? So how has your team gone about that and just kind of intaking some of that customer feedback, but filtering it to an extent so you're not just being reactive to everything that you're hearing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I mean, to that point earlier, like, and to your point, like engineers might not want to talk to the end customer, but that's something Adit and I emphasize to our whole team is like, you know, we're a Slack organization and we have customers directly in our Slack you know, channels where they're interacting with the engineering team, interacting with the account management team, interacting with our product team, support team. And so we take that very seriously and take a lot of pride in, you know, having those relationships with a bunch of our customers. Your point on, you know, how do we filter out a lot of the noise or maybe things that we don't want to prioritize right now is it's really like how, like the metrics you were talking about earlier, you know, the net retention, making sure there's more orders, making sure the metrics on, you know, helping with order discrepancies, if you know, a feature request or product recommendation is coming through the door, how do we tie it to those metrics and make sure it's going to be an increase or increase in value or impactful to those metrics? And
I think our head of product does it really well. He will always ask why. And I think most people don't ask, why do you want this? It's like, hey, I want water. It's like, okay, here, have this bottle. It's like, no, I don't want the water. I actually want the sticker on this bottle. So it's like understanding what's the why is our head of product does that really well to figure out like, should we implement this and tie back to revenue, as Tom said.
Right.
Yeah.
How about you, Tiffany?
Yeah, similar. Even with the engineering side, we started doing lunch and learns with our engineering team to have them really understand why we're building what we're building and how we're building it. Going through all of our customer questions and everything, so you just have an understanding so they can ask questions about the product. So you're not just building, you just know the end goal of if this breaks or this needs to be fixed or this request is important. And I think that's really important because sometimes some people keep their engineering team separate from accounts and people. And I'm like, if once in a while you can have a conversation with a customer, let's do that as well. I think when we're prioritizing, different features, it's one, we already somewhat understand this industry, right? I've been in this industry for 20 years and our advisory board and different people that we talk to. So when a customer gives us a request that is already quote unquote on the roadmap, is deciding if it's going to be something that maybe we'll do phase one of because it's already on our roadmap and we may sped it up depending on, the ROI on it. Or do we push it off a little bit and just enhance a current feature before building a new one? So, our product team and engineering team has been good, really working together of like, okay, this is already on our roadmap. Let's decide how quickly we want to actually jump onto it. Or how do we do this in phases where it's not taking too much of the engineering team to knock it out, but they get to see somewhat of what they wanted to see because we are already going to build it anyway, or we were going to enhance a current workflow that allow for you to see that feature. So even some of the stuff, our customers are asking for now, I'm like, it's coming and it's already been coming. Like, I'm not going to just give it to you. There's nothing that we built that's only been for one customer, thankfully, because sometimes that can happen as well, especially for the big guys, the big enterprises. But I'm like, everything we built literally is for customers that can be used in different ways. So it's just been good.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned around some metrics that you talk about, like daily active users for some level of traction or adoption. But when you think about indicators of growth, I know we were talking about like how the number of stores, or maybe it's the number of companies, or it just changes depending on where you are in your journey. So what are some of those indicators of growth that your team tracks, or maybe like just the North Star, or that metric that's like, if we can, everything we do this year, quarter, if it's driving this outcome forward, we're growing and we're doing the right thing. What are some examples of some of those?
Yeah, so definitely for, our enterprise customers, is looking at how much money can be saved, because when you're, purchasing from these different vendors, you can end up spending a lot if you don't understand who you're spending with. It's helping them if they're quickly looking for new vendors, how quickly can we save them time to find a new vendor? Is looking at, how do we help with productivity, like increasing productivity across their teams between 20 and 30%. Because depending on the team, procurement team can be from one person to 200 people. And it's one person, they're doing the job of trying to handle 10,000 vendors plus. If it's 200 people, they're all over the place because there's too many people trying to navigate all of these vendors across all of their different entities. So the productivity goes down very quickly. And they're not able to get back to the marketing team or the IT team or the CFO very quickly on simple information when it comes to where they're purchasing and where they're about to purchase. So it's a mixture between that 5 to 10% on savings and then that 20, 30% on not only productivity, but also efficiency when it comes to people's time, because a lot of time is wasted when it comes to how people are spending on their balance sheet.
And I know we already got a little bit into some of like the metrics and indicators that you guys kind of track. Was there anything else around kind of like indicators of growth? And I know I mentioned like how it went from customers to stores, but was there anything else you wanted to add there before we switch topics?
I think stores, that's it. It's
stores,
like everything
GMV.
else is efficiency metric. Like the fewer customers that you have and more stores, it tells you that your deals are getting bigger. Yeah, so stores is the key thing we look at, and everything else is an efficiency metric.
Yep.
When you look at that though, like when you say like why is stores the most important versus a customer?
We've derived a direct ROI to each store. We know exactly how much a store is worth from an annualized perspective. And we filtered out all of the types of stores that we won't be able to help, or they won't be able to make the most of digital commerce based on location or whatever in the sales process. So that when something comes into our funnel and we are working on it, we can say with pretty good accuracy what the financial outcome would be per store.
So that actually gets to my next topic. So that was a good one. I was wondering around just acquisition strategies and maybe some of the best ways you've gotten to reaching and converting target customers. So it sounds like you've done the upfront work in the kind of the reaching out and that like prospecting phase and making sure that you're helping the customers that you can. But are there other strategies that you've seen that has worked well for your teams in converting target customers?
Well, I'll say that walking around Philadelphia in Lula vests is not a good idea in going to stores. That's what we did 4 years ago, and we would just walk around,
boots on the ground,
find stores. I think we found from a now perspective that our ICP, our ideal customer persona, that we just have to really hone in on. And we figured out what that is with a lot of failure, experimentation, and now we figured out where those customers live, and we are just hyper-focused on them. We have other vertical leans that we think is useful, like from a customer perspective. For now, that's a distraction. So we were just very focused on one type of customer. There's not many of them, but we know that every time we find them, we'll make them wildly successful.
And what were some of those, because you said you've failed a bunch in finding that ICP kind of early on. What were some of those things that you went through or helped to identify that ICP? I
mean, the outcome of not having the right customer was we always had operational issues with customers. We'd have a 120-day activation period between customer sold and customer go live. And so it took us a year to figure out what is the root cause of that? What are all the guardrails we can add to customers for them to have predictable activation? I think that from a characteristic standpoint, we figured out what's the size of business that we want to work with, what's the location of business, what are the technologies that they have within the business, so that if we integrate, we can really effectively have a predictable, successful outcome. And there's things like that we concentrate on. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, and I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, a lot of it is like, I was speaking about it earlier, just all the technology that these large enterprise customers are using. You know, we're fully integrated with them, so to just switch it on makes it super easy. But yeah, I mean, like over the past 3 years, we've worked more upstream with, you know, more SMB, now more enterprise, and it's been great working with our ICP. But now we're also realizing like we can also help these other smaller stores self-activate through our platform as well, and so giving them the guardrails to be successful.
How about you, Tiffanie, when it comes to just strategies and tactics that have you seen be most effective when trying to convert those target customers?
So much learnings over the years. Similar, I'm sure. I think our ICP has evolved. The thing in procurement, everybody has different titles. So you could say chief procurement officer, head of procurement, head of, all these different titles. So it was never like the title, it was more of the department that we have to go after. Because depending on the organization, it can vary. And then it was a mixture between, the sourcing and procurement teams. But then it was sometimes that we were able to sell directly to the CFO, depending on the organization. So it was, a couple of one-offs here and there. And then we knew we had to focus on mid-market to enterprise, because in order for us to obtain the data that we needed for the platform, we knew, we couldn't just sell to small businesses initially. Startups and small businesses are cheap. They don't have a lot of vendors, or they have a bunch of, kind of priced differently vendors, and that can make for just not consistent data that we needed. And we knew working with medium to large companies allow for us to obtain data very quickly once we closed them. So in closing, a lot of our, first engaging customers were through referrals in our network. And then the rest of it started to be between webinars and kind of referrals from people that were using our platform, which was great. A lot of relationship building, which is, what we've leveraged a lot throughout this industry. And then even as we were thinking of pricing, like when we first started, we started pricing similar to what was in the market. I'm like, this is not going to work. We have to change, because similar to him when it comes to, if we knew we didn't want to charge kind of per seat, because depending on the procurement team, it can be 5 people, it can be 20 people, it can be 100 people. So then that changed what our pricing was going to be. And then so we started to do pricing ranges when it came to how many suppliers that they had, because we knew most companies don't know the exact number of suppliers, but they know the range of suppliers that they have. So then that became a thing like, okay, if you're in this range, this is how much, your initial pilot would be, and it grew from there. So that gave us a way to get through the conversation of, well, what does this cost? What does that pricing call very quickly? And we knew we didn't want to do a seat, because depending, some people get licenses and never use it. And then we have a license that's not being used, and, a pricing that we can't really change after that. But we knew once your supply chain, when a company grows, their employee count grows, but then also their supply chain grows as well. So we knew creating that kind of pricing will allow for us to grow when they grow.
If you were scaling a business, building a team, or just looking to surround yourself with people who get it, you should know about Fiddler Club. It's where Philly's founders, investors, creatives, and leaders come together in a space as ambitious as they are. With workspace, wellness, dining, and curated events all under one roof, Fiddler Club is your invitation to connect, grow, and belong. Step into your ultimate third space, where connections spark and ideas thrive. Visit fiddlerclub.com to learn more. So, talking about target customers, speaking with both of you, it sounds like you both are actually onboarding your largest customer at the same time. So want to just get into that a bit. So we talked about the product. We talked about some of the metrics that kind of give you some signals of growth. We talked about kind of the sales pipeline a little bit. But when you think about onboarding, you mentioned activation was 120 days for you at one point. How can you speed that up? So what did onboarding your initial customer look like versus where you are today? And what were some of those changes that you've made?
Yeah, well, first I have my first customer success and onboarding person, compared to it being myself and my head of product doing the sales / onboarding / support / a little bit of everything. So I think when we first was doing you're so excited to get your first customer. You're like, every email, every phone call, just kind of trying to document every little thing, and now trying to really automate that process. So it's as seamless as it can be, not only for them, but for you as well. And we have a whole process when it comes to collecting their data and integrating with their systems, and some things that will take us months now takes us weeks, right? Like shortening that onboarding process and automating the data collection, automating how we integrate with their systems, tying in the engineering team a lot quicker. So a lot of the things that we just shortened the process, things that would take us way too long, is now better. And then now with our customer success person, like once the sale is closed and her being that lead of, support, onboarding, she does working sessions to make sure that you understand the platform even after you sign on. Because even when you go through the demo, they see the product, you meet with the team, you still you get the product, right? And they're like, let me do another working session just to make sure. So we had that as a part of our initial onboarding, just to make sure we're going through features and different things. And then our support tickets and support at email in addition to her email. So definitely automation as much as possible we did over the last few years.
Yeah, actually very similar. Back in the early days, Adit and I, as you mentioned, boots on the ground, sales, a lot of manual work going into the convenience stores, taking pictures of their inventory, putting it into a spreadsheet, getting them signed up on all the delivery platforms. I mean, it was great. There was a lot of growing pain, a lot of learnings, and we figured out, we dissected it all. As we started to work more upstream, we called it onboarding 2.0, and really the bulk of it was automating everything. So from integrating to their inventory and back office systems, being able to just plug and play and pull that into our system and syndicate that out to all of the DSPs is something we've automated. Creating stores, analyzing the data, that's all plug and play now. If there's a 400 store chain, we're able to intake that and determine what are the best stores we want to launch with the enterprise chain. And so again, a lot of similarities, like everything we were doing manually was taking tons and tons of hours from our team. And now we've automated a lot of it, and it saves our team a ton of time and saves the end customer a lot of time as well.
When it comes to building relationships with customers, both of you actually said that you're like tech space with some like your customers that you work so hard to close. By the time you're done closing them, you guys end up being like friends. So what has that played into the success of your companies? And maybe, I know we talked a little bit about customer feedback, but even more so, how does that help shape your perspective for the business by building those strong relationships with some of those customers?
Yeah, I wish I can do that with everyone, but you can't text with everyone. But even some of the big ones, big customers that we're closing now, it's been 12, 18 months in the making. And as much as we talk, they was like, just text me at this point. I'm like, okay, I will now. Like, I'll text you like I email you, but in a respectful way. Yeah. And I think it helps because one thing, I remember one of the customers were in the process of closing. They ran into one of our investors at an event in California. And then they were like, yeah, Tiffany's been building this relationship with us for like 2 years. She's great at just building a relationship. I'm thinking like, yes, 2 years. Can we close this already? like, yes, at this point we built a friendship. But I'm like, 2 years. But I'm glad you said this to my investors. So when I name drop, they know I'm not just name dropping. Right. So I'm good at that. I've been really good at building relationships and softly nudging and softly following up every few weeks and trying to get, especially really big customers, and to even get on a texting relationship with a big customer is, a big brand that will turn into a customer is huge because they're now invested. Like, they would not have given you their cell phone number if they were not interested. They would have been like, keep emailing me. So to get to that point, I mean, you can't do that with everybody. You'd be texting all day. That's not like the perfect strategy when it comes to sales, but it's a strategy, at least in the early adopters, the first 10 or so, 20 big brand names until you are like scaling from there. And then maybe you just being invited over for dinner at that point where you're just friends. But it's nice where they trust you enough to engage with you in that way.
How about you guys?
Yeah, I think the greatest signal of a good relationship with a customer is when not only can you go out to dinner with them, but when you start learning about their hobbies and what music they listen to and stuff. But I think, Adit and I take a lot of pride in getting to know our end customers and getting on a texting day-to-day basis with them. Not only making sure that the process is moving along, but also just checking in with them here and there, like, how are things going? Anything I can help with? Congratulations with the launch of 420 store or 450 store, right? And so, I think it's super important to build these types of relationships with the customers.
I wish we did it sooner. I mean, we started doing it maybe after we systematically built a lot of the functions, and we were all hands on sales and kind of other parts. I think that we started really texting and reaching out to customers a year after we launched the product. And if I could do one thing differently, I'd start from day one. I think that has brought a lot of, you are like the first line of defense of feedback. And good feedback or bad feedback. And I think that's important.
And you would do it from day one because from a sales pipeline, relationship, credibility, or more so from just a relationship standpoint?
I think I perceive texting as expedited data transfer. For me, it's super simple. I just want to be able to be literally a word away from I'm at your doorstep. Right. Just let me know how I can help you. Like, that is kind of the stance I take from.
When we think about the role of partnerships and integrations, I know you were talking about maybe how you integrate with some of the back office things. So when you get onboarded, it's a little bit easier. I know you were talking about just from a vendor standpoint. I think a big thing that I've noticed is just there's strategic partnerships that you could establish that maybe can kind of get you in the game or further ahead or in the ecosystem or whatever it is, right? But there's an advantage if you can establish a partnership like that. So I am curious, what has your experience been like in establishing partnerships that have either like given you credibility or maybe expedited a certain, I don't know, market or integrating a certain market or something like that? I know you were part of the Comcast Lift Labs Accelerator, so being part of that program, I'm sure has opened you to a bigger ecosystem. But talk about some of the partnerships or maybe some opportunities that allowed you to kind of take advantage of because of some of those partnerships.
Yeah, I love partnerships, especially because one, as a technology that integrates with other technology, we need those partnerships because our platform grows when we partner with more and integrate with more systems. That's how we obtain the data that we have on our platform. And then it allows for us to focus on co-marketing and co-selling, which has been something that we've been kicking off over the last couple of years and figuring out ways to leverage a lot of these legacy systems in the industry that haven't had much upgrade in their procurement technology, just because they're focused on many other things, and us, integrating and updating our technology and partnering with them allows for them to be like, okay, well, if she wants to focus on this, let her do her thing. So that's been really important. And we're always thinking of strategic partnerships where some of our customers are also some of our investors, where we've been looking at more of that, like everyone has procurement, everyone needs to innovate in that space, which we've seen. And how do we expand from there of like, how can we get more folks that are not only investors in our platform, but also using our platform to make sure that they are building a better buyer and vendor relationship within their organization. So those partnerships have just been growing over the years. And even as you mentioned with Comcast Lift Labs, we've been, they're headquartered here in Philadelphia. So we've been a quote unquote on and off partner with them since we started Stimulus. And we had a small contract with them when we first launched Stimulus. And we're now just kind of re-engaging with that partner, because even when you first have like an initial partnership, doesn't mean it's going to stand the test of time sometimes, as the organization change and a reorg and them purchasing other entities and things of that nature. So to even just re-engage with an organization that we started to work with when we first launched is really important to us. And then understanding, like, if you can work with a company like a Comcast that owns Sky and NBC and all the things, you can almost work with any other company because they're such a huge company. And the bigger you get, the more complicated your procurement gets, the more vendors you have, the more data you have, the more usage you're trying to figure out for that data. So anytime we can work with an organization like that, that allows for us to help them, actually end up helping other entities as well.
And I know the accelerator Comcast is focused on enterprise ready.
Yeah.
So being in the vendor management space, I'm sure that's a great fit. Yeah. But how was that accelerator program?
It was great. It was 5 weeks, and I'm glad it was 5 weeks. A lot of accelerators can be long. But it was like that short and sweet of getting as much done as you can over that 5 weeks, but it doesn't end. It's just trying to get it, what are your initial goals? Who are you looking to work with teams? What lines of business are you looking to work with? And making as many introductions throughout those 5 weeks as possible, some in person, some virtual. And it was great to just have a 5-week crash course of how to navigate through Comcast, Sky, and NBC Universal, because it's so huge and there's so many people and so many reorgs over the years. So it was amazing just to see all the new people there, all the new departments, and do a lot of work that probably, if you didn't know anyone there, would take you 12 to 24 months, give or take, if you did not have strategic 5 weeks of this is what we're going to do in these 5 weeks.
So I know we talked a lot about different functions. We jumped in the product area, onboard accelerators, partnerships, all these different things. Adit, you were mentioning day one, you would have maybe done something a little bit different with the customer relationship. So I am curious, what function would you say you would double down on looking back earlier? When we were talking, we were saying, how can we kind of synchronize the organization so everyone's kind of on the same page in terms of planning and everything. But when you think about prospecting, your pipeline, sales, marketing, distribution, onboard activation, all these things, is there a certain area that you would have doubled down or focused more on and maybe invested less in upfront?
Probably sales, right?
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
I think that we scaled our sales team too quickly, and then the result was a lot of customers of all types of sizes. We had no idea what our ICP was. That resulted in us trying to solve these secondary fires related to onboarding and activation. But the primary fire is actually like sales experience and quality. And so I'd say it's sales. If I could really understand the customer persona and narrow in the ICP quicker, I think it probably could have saved us a year.
So you're saying maybe do more like marketing product work and then jump into sales?
No, not the marketing product work, but more so understanding and segmenting our customers into the right segments and figuring out, of every retail store, we've chosen C stores. But then of every C store, what are the types that we must go after first? And I think in the early days, you have to kind of take anyone that accepts your product, but then you quickly have to figure out when's the time that you specialize. And so that took us a little bit longer than expected.
Yeah, before it was just casting a big net,
right?
Which, anyone starting a company would be excited to do and feels natural, but I agree, just being able to segment it down to our ICP and really focus on that has been really game-changing over the past year and a half, 2 years.
How about you, Tiffanie? Has there been a certain area that you wish you maybe would have doubled down on looking back on it?
Similar to what he said, I probably, like when you hire your VP of sales and start adding to your sales team too quickly, without having your ICP mapped out, you end up wasting a lot of time and a lot of money. And you have your early adopters and certain people, but when they turn, it's like, yay, you know what I mean? Like, and then there you kind of start over, right? You're starting your whole kind of sales pipeline over. So I think we would have figured that out a lot quicker before we started adding to our sales team, where their goal is just to sell. Their goal is to bring in whoever says yes, and then they use the product, and you're doing all these things to keep them. And then you realize that's not where your focus should be, and then you just waste time. And then I think also in the beginning, it's always the sales. You're going to the wrong conferences maybe, or you're sponsoring the wrong things, and you're just putting your money in places that could be used in so many other ways that you don't know until you're figuring out, like, should I be here? Should I wait to go to this? And just a lot of wasted money when it comes to sales in the beginning, because the goal is just to see numbers sometimes.
So I know we're getting close to it, but I just want to talk about some key trends that we're seeing in the industry. AI is everywhere. We're talking a lot about it. When we were talking about it, it's almost hit this point where everyone says it. So how can you kind of navigate the noise to kind of set yourself apart in how you're using it, but making sure you're actually focused on solving your customers' problems and not just throwing AI on things? So I am curious to just get your thoughts and your view on just AI today, but also what is some advice in terms of implementing it at your company and making sure you're not just doing it.
So we've been, relationship intelligence since we started. And it was really important to us to use machine learning and intelligence and AI. We wasn't using Gen AI, but we were using AI in the beginning, especially on the back end, to automate a lot of work that we were doing, and then growing from there and learning how to implement it on the front end and beta testing different features. Because one of the companies when I was starting Stimulus that I just really loved was really focused on AI. I was like, oh, we have to use this. And this was years ago. And I was like, okay, like and I was already using like Beautiful.ai, Grammarly, all the things that we're using, different systems. I'm like, we need to figure out ways to implement this within procurement, because the goal was always to automate like so much stuff in procurement, probably everywhere, but procurement especially is so manual, and just it's why it takes forever for people to get back to you, and trying to figure out the best time to sell to someone and understand what RFPs are coming out, just a very manual process. So as AI has increased in the conversation, it was figuring out how to leverage that as an extension of the procurement team and not replacing your procurement team. And as we try to talk about it, it's like, okay, I want to talk about it, but is it really separating us at the same time? Because now everybody's doing it. But also showcasing, hey, we've been intelligent since we've launched, and we didn't just say it over the last 2 years. And expanding on that, and then helping our procurement leaders understand, like, our goal is to be an extension of your team. We like to say we're a chief of staff for your buyers and a marketing assistant for your vendors, helping them know the right times to market to you, and you building better relationships with them, whether you're working with them now, working with them in the future. And, some things with AI is focused on replacing folks, and I'm like, okay, how do we be your team, right? If you know procurement, you barely get an assistant, let alone a chief of staff.
Right. How do you augment the team versus
how do you augment the team? 1 person, 10 people, doesn't matter. How do we help you? So we started to really look into ways to market in that way and give education that, and one thing we kept hearing at a conference is we just came from, to remember that AI is a tool, it's not the solution. And I think if we start saying that and showing that on our website of like, we're not just giving you AI just to give it to you, but this is how we're going to help with it. That's our goal, and that's how we're going to look at marketing moving forward.
And how about you guys?
Yeah, I'd say there's kind of 2 ways we've been looking at AI. It's similarly like an extension of the team. How can we enable the Lula team to use AI and the data in a more efficient way to make their day-to-day lives easier, and therefore pleasing the customer? And then on the other side, it's how do we bake AI into our product and do it in the most sensible way? And really what it boils down is to the being able to analyze the data of like, what are the best-selling items in your store? What are the best-selling items online and stuff like that? So rather than having a whole new AI flashy product, it would be really more so what is the value we're already providing in our product, and how do we take AI to push it even further?
Yeah, I have noticed that in some products that I've used is that they had AI all over the place, like marketing language. And then like a month later, it was almost baked into the product, and they were just using things like generate this or do this, but there was no word of AI, or there's no sparkle. The sparkle is kind of like the universal AI thing. Yeah, so, and it just disappeared. And I thought it was interesting because I still felt and knew it was AI because of the experience, but it wasn't like in your face, like here's some flashy things. But.
Yeah, and that's what I learned at the Comcast Accelerator, and we talked about that a lot, of all the years they've been using it that you just didn't know.
Right. And
consumers, any B2B, wanting a mixture between and don't know. You don't always need to know. Everybody wants to say it because it's the exciting new thing, but I think the best way is that you don't know and you just get an amazing experience.
Anything to add on that?
No, I loved your feedback on using AI in a way that no one knows what's going on, but behind the scenes you add value. I'm a very strong believer of that. I also think from a team efficiency standpoint, Tom and I believe everyone in your team should have access to like real-time production data, but historically it's been tough to figure out what's going on. So now there's more and more tools popping up everywhere that allow you to connect with production data, understand it, query, connect it to other quick things. And I think that helps teams move faster. And so that's something I'm really excited about.
Last topic for us, what's been the biggest learning as a leader of your company from the early stages to today? But specifically as a leader, what are some maybe the ways that, or kind of mindsets that have helped you kind of be resilient through some of those challenges that kind of looking back on, you think that is definitely what kind of got you through there, or maybe any other advice you have as just being the leader of your companies?
I just say start thinking of startup land or building a company or project from kind of my training from graduate school, that it is all an experiment and you will get it wrong 17,000 times. But you'll get it right the time that you get it right. So I think that has been really good because it takes away a lot of the nonsense from like blame games to like toxic cultures. It's all an experiment. Everyone's trying to keep iterating quick until you, like the goal is just figure it out. And I think thinking about things from that lens has been helpful because we've changed pricing like 7 times since inception until we figured out what's the best one. We've changed our overall business model, our ICP, our branding 3 times. And you just keep iterating until it just perfectly lands. So just think about it as a big experiment.
Yeah, in agreement, like as much as you can be early on at the company, just be super nimble, make changes here and there. Don't be afraid to fail and pivot. I mean, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we had a major pivot of what our company was even doing. And so just being resilient and comfortable and going out of your comfort zone to push those things forward.
Yeah, I would say yes to all of that, as well as celebrating everything, all of the small wins, because I know for a long time I would just celebrate the quote unquote big things, whatever that considered to be. Sure. And, my team reminded me, hey, we fixed this button or we did this. I'm like, okay. And reminding yourself that they're excited about that. So you should be excited about it too, because as he just mentioned, like that iteration, that's progress. You're making progress. That button wasn't working last week, right? And being excited about every little thing, because the biggest thing to do is to go from idea to execution. And whatever that execution is, you have to constantly grow and iterate and understand that the quote unquote product is never really finished, right? You're always going to be adding to the workflow and enhancements to the features. And so if you don't celebrate all of the wins, you're going to be in this constant wheel of trying to get somewhere that you're not going to get to, because you're always going to be changing your product. You're always going to be expanding your team. You're always going to be evolving the idea, pivoting or expanding the idea. So celebrate the wins.
Awesome. Well, that wraps up the conversation. Thank you all for being part of this. I'm really excited to kind of kick off this Roundtable Series with you. I really appreciate you joining.
Cool. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Seth.